non-cash return.
10. Something like that. Okay, well, thank you for coming today. This is the crowdfunding panel, and I'm Frank Peters. And I appreciated the opportunity. They asked me just a little while ago if I would moderate this panel, and I was thrilled for lots of reasons, but one in particular, I'm going to be your master of ceremonies on the boat tonight. And I thought this session would help me, kind of get in the groove. So that's your role, is to enjoy the time with us today. Yeah, come right in and have a seat here. They gave us the smallest room, obviously,
well, to
right?
feel the crowd.
Yes, that's right. It's quality. And I get to go home and tell my wife that it was standing room only in this session. So
You can sell the seats.
She always says the same thing when I tell her that. She says, "Next time, bring more chairs." Come right in. Come right in.
I'll see. There we go.
Would you mind going over that way so we can clear the door? Or bye-bye. Thank you. All right, come on in. We're going to get started a little slow. Pardon me, huh? I think a lot of people still at lunch. But anyway, we're at capacity, so let's get started, huh? Crowdfunding. What a subject. I have a distinguished panel to liven this subject up. So what I'd like to do is we're going to go around and briefly introduce ourselves, and then we're going to zero in. One or two of us have slides we'll go over. So let's get started. Question?
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, crowd. My name is Christian Zandvliet, co-founder and managing director of Symbit.com. Symbit is the first equity-based crowdfunding platform in the world, which serves investors as well as entrepreneurs to connect and actually receive direct equity investments being done via the internet.
Maybe you want to focus the microphone just a little bit,
Sorry.
Karsten?
It was kind of clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be for posterity here. Yes.
Otherwise, we have to repeat it in the back of the audience.
That's right. In Russian.
My name is Carsten Wenzlaff. I'm one of the founder of Ecosome, which is a private research institute based in Berlin. And we did a study on the legal framework of crowdfunding and crowd investing for the European Commission last year. And we are doing a lot of research on where the market is going, what kind of volume is being traded and stuff. And so that's our role as a neutral observer of the market and evaluator.
Yeah, welcome also from my side. My name is Peter Braun. I'm the CEO and founder of Mountain Club. Besides many things I did before in my career, this is a very exciting thing. We also created an online platform for our investors. But I'm really against this German invention. You know that crowdfunding is a German invention, by the way?
No.
It's called crowdfunding. The Americans understand my little bad humor here.
Okay, all right. Now that we get started here. Oh, I can't even see. Is that Peter's presentation? Peter, I thought would give you, Peter, we had a preparation call. We look like we're just winging it, but no, we've studied for a gate very dedicatedly. And Peter and I got on the phone just a week ago, and he said, and I asked him if I could share this, he said for the first time in his life he was going to be negative. So with that, I thought we would start with Peter. Huh? May I? And oops, is that a happy message? Can you see your slides?
Sure. Not really, but I know them.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Maybe I can stand up briefly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a
Yeah.
full screen? We don't get any larger? Okay. No. I hope you all can see what we try to do here.
I can help you otherwise.
All right. So just a little bit of background. Crowdfunding, of course, is not a German invention. But as you can see, the activity mostly sprung off the US, where we have seen quite a bit of volume in doing that. what I find fascinating about this is that mostly it has been artist projects like films, theaters, movies, where people have said, okay, this is my dream and I want to live that dream, but I'm lacking $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 or euros to do this. So who's going to support me? And what people got in return was not a share in the company, but maybe an invitation to the first show, or a free DVD, or I don't know, a special dinner with whoever. I think that's great, and that also started off here. Crowdfunding is a phenomenon that we have to deal with, and it's important to discuss. Also in the field of social topics, where you are looking for charity, I think this is great, where you can collect for certain situations over on an online platform funds. But the next slide, let's see if that works here. Where do I have to point? I have the same problem like Nelson.
I don't think it works.
Okay, maybe you can.
You have a driver.
Yeah. All right. So I think we just try to show this here. Who doesn't get funding gets crowdfunding. It's a little negative statement. It started. Here we go. Wonderful. Thank you. So it all started, blue skies, wonderful. Very dynamically, we see that it's really crowding the crowdfunding scene. It's really getting very, very full. More and more platforms spring to life. Very often, and that's also fascinating, fundraising is even done outside of these platforms. For example, there has been a movie in Germany from a series, and within 1 week they collected over 1 million euro, which was, they had planned for like 3 months to do the fundraising, but because there was already a large fan base, they have been able to collect this, you know, in a snap, which was very, very impressive. But I think there will be clouds, not crowds, and there will be some striking flash, and I think it will negatively affect the angel investor and private investment scene. And why is that? I think we have, oh, please, next slide, if someone would be so nice. Thank you. So as I said, there's a non-profit zone where crowdfunding is brilliant and should be active, and to entice more people to become investors into this. This is great. But there's a line, and it's not a fine line, it's a danger zone that we will cross with more professionalism of investors. I don't know if you can read it, Fools, Family and Friends, the 3 Fs, the typical ones, to help you starting off. Then business angel networks, getting more and more professional. And I think regulation will be and will become an issue. We all see that there will be more and more regulative requirements in the banking environment, in the private funding environment. And I think what we as angels and angel networks and as EBAN have accomplished is that we became more and more professional and more accepted also by other investors in the market. Also, I think many angels and other financial investors the super angels in particular, start their own companies. So they do the incubation themselves to avoid the mistakes in the setup of companies. With crowdfunding, this is not the case. It will be, and that's my projection, very difficult to do a follow-on funding. Last slide, please, and then I'm through with my initial statement. So, and crowdfunding is great. It's dynamic, it's chaotic, it's charismatic, it has all of these things, but it's not streamlined, organized, looking into growth, and that's my statement, of course. And what we tried and have accomplished is we're now accepted by venture capital as business angels, even sought after as sector experts, as venture partners. I think it's important to continue fundraising for the whole lifetime until you have a good exit of a company. Hopefully a good exit, not the other way of exit. Yeah, there will be an exit. We're clear about that. There will be an exit. But a voluntary one. And I think that's very important. And then my last slide, I think, is this one. But just my contact word. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Peter. All right. Well, we'll go to questions very quickly here. It's going to be an interactive session. Karsten, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to switch to my slides?
Sure.
It's, I think, the top file.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. I think the first one, Carsten. Yeah. So.
Very good.
So. Yeah,
thank you for squeezing in. I know where I asked for the smallest room.
There's plenty of room. It's a crowdfunding.
Yeah.
There's still plenty of seats on the table.
We'll give around a hat later on so that we can fund the session.
Yeah. To get a bigger room.
Yeah. I was, as you can see, I'm already a little bit with a jet lag because on my presentation it's already the 24th of April. So forgive me about that. So already we have some explanations on how these things go, but I just want to give ahead the different types of crowdfunding that we see. And so we really need to be clear about them. But maybe we should first see where crowdfunding comes from in terms of what's its source. And maybe can you go to the next slide? I already talked about my research institute. Maybe we skip to that. So we have to be aware that crowdfunding, the most important part about crowdfunding is not the money. It's a big mistake to think that crowdfunding is so interesting because people get funding for their startups or their projects. In fact, the most successful projects are those that fail. People who fail to get funding get much more out of it because it's a testing of concepts. It's a way to get in touch with people, with potential customers. It's market research. It's a lot more than just getting the funding for a project. Business angels, venture capital firms, they do provide some of this as well. So that's why we see, of course, a competition between crowdfunding, business angel funding, VC funding, for instance, in terms of knowledge sharing, etc. But we see startups that are using crowdfunding for a more specific type of knowledge. For instance, we have startups that use crowdfunding and ask for feedback on their products, and so that's really a type of market research that is really valuable. We have crowdfunding experiments where a company was trying to raise 10,000 euros for a prototype production. There was a famous watch on Kickstarter that was asking for $10,000, and the company spent $30,000 on marketing that Kickstarter campaign. So they asked for much less than they would have. They asked for much less than they spent because they used it as a way to market their prototype to potential customers, and it was of course extremely successful. And for them, a really good way of using this. And then also what was mentioned, in the movie industry right now, we see a lot of small companies, creative companies, who are using this. The movie that was mentioned earlier, Stromberg, which got 1 million euros very, very fast, didn't need that money at all. The production company already had the money, and they used it just because they wanted to engage their fans. On Kickstarter, we see game companies who have the backing of money to produce those games, but they're using it as a way to interact with the fans of the games.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. And so they're kind of like gaming the system a little bit there.
Yeah. And let's go to the next slide. this is sort of the two types of crowdfunding that we see, and where it's most relevant in terms of startup financing. This one was on Indiegogo. It's a great tool. It's you put your iPhone on a camera stand and it moves with you. So when you move through the room, it moves with you and makes pictures of you. A great product. It wasn't even developed, but they put already a video there how it would work from the point of view of the camera. And it's a really emotional video and got funded quite well. I mean, as you see, it got above their goal. And this is an example of how crowdfunding can work even without equity. And then, of course, we have on the next slide an example of the previous one. Yeah, this is a German crowd investing platform that is really new, and this is a startup that was funded by the crowd, and they were asking for 50,000 euros, and they received 100,000 euros in 8 hours. So it took them 8 hours to get from 0 to 100,000 euros. Of course, they were spending about 3 to 4 months to prepare their campaign. These two women are preparing a special kind of underwear. They're preparing a bra for women who are small in size but have large breasts. And they say, they tell the story.
That explains a lot.
In the video.
That works on the video.
In the video. But you know, the interesting thing is, they go there and they explain why they can't get these kind of bras themselves. They can't shop them anywhere, so they want to make these nice bras, and they were hugely successful. So how does this work? On SeedMatch, you buy shares of 250 euros, and you become a shareholder with non-voting rights. And there's a standard contract for each startup and for each shareholder. And all the communications with the investors is done through the website, and there's a really standard procedure. And the platform gets 10% of the shares, and also every year the platform audits the startup, so they get an audit fee from each successful startup. So both a huge successful model for the startup, but also for the platform. And then maybe on the last slide, something that is also forgotten in the crowdfunding discussion is peer-to-peer lending. We see a huge number of platforms where people directly lend each other money, and it's sometimes really small, but it's also often used for business funding, sometimes for startup funding, and it's something that is growing rapidly in volume. On the next slide, this is really small print, because these are all the platforms that are dealing with crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending and crowd investing in Europe only. So we see around 200 to 300 platforms worldwide right now, and in Europe at least, I mean, this is really just not even all of them. There have been new ones every day almost in the last couple of weeks. One reason we see this is that the European legislation was much more favorable towards crowd investing than the American one. We talked about the Jobs Act. It was very difficult to set up a crowd investing platform in the States. And here in Europe, at least in the European Union, it was fairly easy to do that. I mean, it's a legal hassle, but the roles were quite clear. You could ask for projects not, I mean, under 100,000 euros. Otherwise, you have to create a prospectus. You can't have more than 99 investors in each European Union country. Otherwise, you would have to create a prospectus because it's a public offering. And there are a number of other limitations there as well. But for these small startups, for these small projects, it worked. And we can see now at least on the crowd investing platforms that I haven't seen any startup funding that hasn't failed on these new platforms. Each of them get at least what they're asking for, 50,000, 80,000 euros. Wow. Most of them get to 100,000 euros. Wow. And is there fraud involved? Could there be fraud involved? I mean, maybe Karsten can talk more about how to prevent that.
He's our expert in fraud.
we have to no, you have to keep in mind that crowdfunding is a very personal relationship between a funder and a project owner, even though it's on the internet and it's platform based, but it's transparent, and people go to these platforms and they're suddenly on the internet with their faces, with their video, with their idea. And that's why I think it's something that makes fraud a little bit more difficult. I think it's much more easier to fraud business angels or venture capital firms than the crowd. And it's much more difficult doing crowd investing because on the platform you have 30 seconds or maybe 60 seconds to convince an investor. But I think most business angels take much more time doing deals and looking at the companies.
So you think business angels have a greater potential to be defrauded? That's what I heard you say. So, well, we'll come back to that in just a minute.
So let me just wrap up. I think that crowdfunding is going to be a disruptive way to the traditional financing methods, and the only way that business angels can profit from it by learning really quickly how that works and then incorporating it in their strategy and advising startups on using both crowdfunding and business angel financing for getting money.
Thank you. Very nice. Very nice. Christian, is your company listed up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yes. You wanna?
I do not have a presentation, but I do have an equity-based crowdfunding platform. So shall we take a look at what we've been doing for the last year?
Yes.
If there is a browser.
There should be,
Yeah, there we go. And if you could please surf to simbit.com.
That's another body. But it's a Russian.
That might be tricky, huh?
Yeah.
Cyrillic? Someone knows Cyrillic?
Oh, there we go.
Or you go to Google.
This reflects the state of crowdfunding in general, I guess. A little technical difficulties.
No,
Yes, yes.
yeah, the site is on there. So let's let's talk about indeed equity-based crowdfunding. From our dear panelists, we've got the idea that equity-based crowdfunding is still in a very early stage. We've been working on our platform for the last 4 years, creating a safe and legal environment, because we do underline the problems within the industry. The idea in itself is so simple that there are so many entrepreneurs basically entering the market with insufficient constructions, insufficient structures, not fairly thought through the complete process of due diligence. Yeah, thank you. We're currently watching simbit.com. If we could please surf to...
Maybe you can come.
Oh yeah, I can show it. All right. Is there any appetite for any kind of particular ventures? Who are the real business angels? You don't care. Just healthcare.
Women's lingerie.
Unfortunately.
Massage.
Let's see. Healthcare. Unfortunately, there's no healthcare here.
Wellness?
I have an online and mobile social game for children.
There we go. That sounds perfect.
That sounds perfect. So what we see over here is your typical ID page for an entrepreneur, and we ask entrepreneurs as soon as they enter our platform to upload a movie and any kind of media associated to their actual project. And as you can see, the site looks like a very interactive internet page in order to spur crowdsourcing among investors and the entrepreneurs. We do think that the industry in itself is focusing way too much on the actual accumulation of funds to fund projects. It's not about actually bringing together the funds. It's about what happens with the funds afterwards and how the crowd can benefit to the rightful spending of those funds, actually making the company better. And It's the numbers are actually live. So the entrepreneur in question here is requesting an investment amount of 80,000 euros, and he's willing to sell off 10% of his shares in his legal entity. And what we try to do with our equity-based crowdfunding platform is to place crowdfunding in itself under corporate law rather than just applied law, simply because there are enough protective mechanisms within current legislation in the European Union to protect crowd investors sufficiently, but you need to make sure that your framework does fit into the legislation. We've heard a lot of discussion going on about relaxation, about crowdfunding, basically to allow crowdfunding platforms to easily start up their business. I do not think it's necessary to actually ease or relax legislation surrounding crowdfunding. Crowdfunding platforms themselves should think about any kind of moral hazard that could basically come from crowd investing and make sure that they have sufficient countermeasures for that. We work, for example, we work together with BDO for our complete due diligence of any funded project. Obviously, the level of due diligence differs per start stage of the entrepreneur. Either it's a startup ID or an existing company, and obviously on the funds raised. And we allow fundraising from 20,000 euros up to 2.5 million euros. That has everything to do with the exclusion of any prospectus. We used standardized contracts, which we developed in close collaboration with AKD, which is the former legal branch of Deloitte. And we have a no-class action letter of the authorities financial markets in Holland, as well as the Dutch Central Bank. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a really. Please jump in.
Who in the audience is good with math? Can I see a show of hands? 10% of the company for 80,000 euros. What's the valuation? About $1 million per yeah. So what's your sense for that? Is that so the entrepreneur is setting up like his pre-money valuation in a way there?
Yeah, it's all left to the entrepreneur himself to come up with a valuation, and it's up to the crowd to assess whether that valuation is correct. We do allow entrepreneurs to change their actual valuation while during the crowdfunding process, basically to up the antes. They can never go down with their percentage of equity, they can only go up. Because in close collaboration with the crowd, we see a lot of comments and questions being raised about the actual pre-money valuation. And in most cases, entrepreneurs have a tendency to overvalue their creations. Therefore, it's very important also not only to have the crowd as being unsophisticated investors, but also to have business angels themselves being active on crowdfunding platforms. Maybe not to the extent of the real live deals where the due diligence is totally carried out by one angel, but we're talking more about syndicates of angels, basically sharing the knowledge from their own due diligence processes within inner circles, which are closed, so basically on an invitation only.
Another question is, how long has it taken you to build this platform, and have you raised money yourself to build it?
Yeah, we raised money ourselves. Actually,
and at what valuation?
on a €1 million valuation, and we did more or less a crowdfunding campaign amongst bank directors and insurance professionals, simply because we were young guys lacking the actual knowledge about the financial system. So we.
That's dumb money. Dumb money.
Yeah, it is dumb money.
No,
Bankers know nothing about starting companies. So.
That's true. That's why they invested in a couple of young and enthusiastic guys with a vision to bring crowdfunding on a more professional scale. But we did need their skills and their acumen towards actual legislation and interpretation of that.
And the other part of my question is how
much did you raise?
We raised to 200,000 euros.
That's nice. That's nice. And how much effort? How many months?
It took us 4 years.
4 years. Wow.
Yeah, from basically the attic to just thinking about the ID to actually developing the legal structure, get our partnerships up and running with BDO and AKD. And we got our no class action letter actually in December 2010 last year, and we went live in April 2011. with our platform.
And your partners, have they made commitments yet to contribute further rounds of funding?
Oh yeah, sure. Obviously, it's kind of an interesting area, crowdfunding in itself, especially now the Jobs Act relaxes the American market. So there's a lot of interest in European equity-based players, basically to either buy them, acquire them completely, and let them basically put their knowledge into the American market, simply because it's a bigger market. But there's a lot of interest.
All right. So I've been asking all the questions. How about questions from the audience, please? Yes, sir.
If we are talking about the success in crowdfunding, does it mean that, generally speaking, decision making is more emotional if we compare these two business angels? It's like B2C comparing to B2B.
Yeah, we refer to that as rather return on involvement than return on investment. So it's what we see is we do offer the opportunity to basically exit from your investment. So once the proposition is fully funded, you always have the opportunity to actually cash out directly. Via the actual Symbit site, but what we measured among the first line of investors within our 5 successfully funded projects is that their investment horizon is somewhere between 5 and 7 years. They rather see the entrepreneur fail with their money, but having tried it, than cashing out on a very early stage.
Very nice. So, Brigitte?
I have 2 questions. One, investment we're looking at now started with Kickstarter. Great little business, but actually what they most needed was entrepreneurial support, and they're not much further than where they were. So how does the mentoring happen? And second, as an angel, what I find is usually the value creation happens second, third, fourth round, especially when there's tough rounds, and if you're not right in there, you just get kicked out as an investor. So in this, how would that happen? Those investors, do they have any protections on follow-on rounds? Do you think anybody can make any money?
Yes, I do think that. What we do is we use the cooperative, basically a cooperative structure to bundle all the investors. So as the entrepreneur only has to deal with one legal entity, we made pretty sure that the companies aren't flooded with investors. There's only one shareholder.
Who's representing them to make sure the next rounds they're not put to the side?
The crowd themselves. The crowd, the board of that cooperative is being formed by the entrepreneur as well as being supplemented from crowd investors. The crowd themselves have the opportunity to directly vote away the complete board if they feel anything strange is going on. And remember, the complete structure is being placed under Dutch corporate law, which makes the entrepreneur on a personal level even liable if fraud were to occur.
So do you have an SPV then that they all invest into?
Yeah.
All right. So it's a legal entity that they invest.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is the cooperative, usually being around the 1900s, frequently being used to raise funds in agricultural investments from a very large group of farmers, mostly, to make heavy capital investors. And that works perfectly for crowdfunding. And you can do the actual voting process online, and you can actually carry out the membership certificates, as we call them, e.g. shares, and you can distribute those online.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
His question was, what happens in the case of a down round?
In case of a down round, the investors are protected. So if there were to be a voting within the company, either to allow a second round of investment or another means of funding coming in, the actual crowd is being asked to vote on that. And within the cooperative model, it's a 50% plus one of the vote is the leading voice of the complete crowd.
So your vote is to go out of business or accept dilution?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's basically the point. Also, I think in this model valuation, the pre-money valuation was 1 million, accepted by people who are not very familiar maybe with valuation of companies. And my personal, I'm convinced that later financing will be difficult if business angels become involved or venture capital becomes involved. They have certain tools they use in their contracts, if they're not part of that, and I think that's the point, that's why I'm coming back to this, the early investors will be diluted, and that will eventually lead to a scandal where everyone then says, I got screwed. Even if it was legally fine, in the financial return they're having, they will be, let's say, positively largely compromised. And that is why I was saying in my opening statement, it's great if you don't expect a financial return. If you are used as a sounding board, do you like the product? I saw there was one 3D printer on Indiegogo where you can get part of or the complete product for a certain amount of funding. So they're using it as a sales tool, which I think is also ingenious. That's great. But if you are really looking for a share in a company and hoping for making a multiple like a VC or business angel does, I think it's going to be really tough in later rounds.
And I would say...
the only thing I can reply to this is that what we've seen so far, and we've been active for 11 months now, is that the crowd isn't as unsophisticated as we all think. They learn from each other, and they learn in a very fast pace. What we see is questions being raised about the actual valuation of a company, where non-sophisticated investors start reacting, and they start learning from each other. They interact via the platform, and what we do offer prior to reaching the 100%, investors can retract their investment. So what we've already been experiencing on the platform is entrepreneurs who were willing to change their actual valuation, and we saw investments which were already on a 20 or up to 30,000 level, basically being distracted by the crowd, pulled back by the crowd, simply because there were a couple of very smart remarks about the actual valuation to which the entrepreneur actually didn't have an answer. So that proves the case that the crowd is very well equipped to protect itself as long as we bundle them and we bring the motivations in line. And I think equity-based crowdfunding can do that far better than donation-based models.
What this reminds me of is a little bit the pink sheets that we've seen in the US, unregulated markets, people can invest, and there has been largely influential people in the so-called market making. So stocks have been pushed or stocks have been written down. The crowd followed this, people went short, which is here not possible, and made a lot of money in manipulating the news flow. I think this is also possible here. How do you protect this from, say, a competitor being active in this scenario and scaring everyone away and stuff like that? It's really tough, I think.
Yeah, in the beginning, before actually getting funded, it's open to anyone. Or you have to use the private mode of Symbit, in which you simply put your ID up in private mode. We got a lot of questions about people not willing to opening up to Kimono to some extent because they had a brilliant ID, and therefore we offer a private mode where they can simply interact with their own crowd by sending out an email invitation. And I think that's one of the first actual means and tools for entrepreneurs. And if we look after funding, the actual membership certificates being traded, this is not an unregulated market. This is something which is very closely regulated by the actual board of the cooperative, because it's in their best interest to govern this process as fairly as possible.
But it's not about Symbit, it's about crowdfunding.
Yeah.
And there are hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And they're not all based like you are.
We agree that the industry is in need of a dominant model.
The purpose is not to sell your company from the platform.
No.
So we're talking about crowdfunding, and what I see, I've invested in lots and lots of deals, and there are a few of us in the room that have invested in at least 10 deals. How many?
How many?
Okay.
20.
So those people that have invested in 10 deals, how many of you look at the cap table really, really very early on? I think almost all of us. That's the first thing we ask for, a very early thing that we ask for. And one of the things we're interested in is how many investors are there? Because the more unsophisticated investors you've got in the deal, the riskier it is.
Correct.
And that is a risk that we don't need as investors. So we're looking for pretty clean cap tables. Your single purpose entity investment strategy is one, but not all crowdfunding platforms are using that single purpose entity. And but it's more than one voter. You've got a board that has to address issues. So maybe it's like having 10 shareholders or 15 shareholders instead of one shareholder because of the makeup of that single purpose entity. And that represents a problem for subsequent investors. So the whole thing that I'm doing here is agreeing with Peter with respect to the likelihood that crowdfunded companies will see subsequent investment from professionals, that being sophisticated angels and venture capitalists. And that is my primary concern.
That's good point. Joseph,
yeah,
jump in here,
just a
please.
question. I heard some of the comments that you made on the regulation, but did you actually do to cope with the European legislation on that, which is the MiFID, the regulation on 100 people investing and 100,000 maximum and so forth? How did you actually cope with all those issues?
We use the cooperative. All investors become members of an overall Symbit cooperative and are therefore being bundled into one group, making it no longer a public offering.
But a follow-on question to that, because we have created a platform, so for us it's also very interesting and relevant. The point in the end is not that you have only 99 maximum shareholders, but you have a public offering if you promote a story to more than 100 people. So how do you deal with that? I mean, I think, at least in Switzerland, we would be in a gray zone. I think in Germany as well. Maybe in Holland there's especially, okay. So it's getting tougher. Regulation in Switzerland will not allow exempts that we had for so-called qualified investors anymore. It's really about who do you offer the stock to.
Yeah, I agree, and it also comes back to the comment of Mr. Payne. The crowdfunding industry in itself is emerging, especially on the equity-based pyramids. We're trying to, we're operating in a gray area, and we need to be in close contact with not only the actual regulators, with attorneys, with entrepreneurs, but also with follow-up investors, like business angels, like private equity, venture capital. We're not here to create just a single product. This is evaluating, evolving over time to fit within the current landscape for funding. And we still think that crowdfunding in itself is a great tool, not only for example, market research purposes, but also to let people or allow the greater public to invest in and still make business opportunities as attractive as possible to follow up investors.
And on that question, yeah.
Jump in.
Oh, fine. On the last question, I mean, the thing is, it seems to be that regulative authorities are sort of turning a blind eye towards the idea of the public offering to more than 99 investors. It seems to be that because on other platforms, really the limit is at 100,000 euros, that authorities say it's fine to advertise that on the internet unless you don't have that, unless you don't have more actual investors at the end. And I think there will be some movement there that we will see another exemption coming up for that the platforms have to do some sort of, I mean, they were already doing due diligence, but there will be a framework for what kind of due diligence the platforms have to do in order to be able to go on the internet. And on your question, I mean, of course, there are always platforms which underperform in terms of what they do. I mean, it starts with all kinds of stuff with what they can't do, and in terms of brokering and the distribution of payments and all these things. But that's, again, my impression is that the people who are giving money on these platforms are looking very carefully what the platforms are doing, and they're looking through that. And I've seen platforms go out of business because they haven't had any initial projects on their website because the website looked so unprofessional and there was clearly not much work in that. So I think there's a process of weeding out the good weeding out the bad platforms and keeping the good ones in. And also, I mean, this is something we have to keep in mind, that the money that people give is very little. I mean, I don't know, when do you start at 200? No, what is it?
20 euros.
20 euros. We see in crowdfunding a really strange phenomenon. People give much more than they would get back in material value. So because it seems to be that the added bonus of crowdfunding is an emotional value. People use these platforms because they want to be part of it, and that's on Kickstarter, that's on crowd investing platforms. They don't have your framework that they invest for getting money. They're investing for the fun of it a lot of times.
But Kickstarter's been philanthropic efforts until today.
Yeah.
All right, I've got a question over here. Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Andrea Benedict from Serbian Business Angel Network. So we see that crowdfunding is an alternative to business angel investing in the early stage stages, right? And what is lacks is, of course, the business angel involvement. When you get mentorship, you get support, you have their contacts on the market. But also, business angels can also profit from this information which they get on the crowdfunding platforms, as they see the interest right away and they see the product, what kind of visibility is going to be and how popular it's going to be. So is there any way that you can make a symbiosis there, like between business angels and crowdfunding, not waiting for the second stages, third stages, just co-invest or make some joint venture? I think I would like to ask this question to Peter. Just, is there any way that you can see that you can co-invest in this stage and that you can get both benefits?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to make a statement and say what Korstian and his team has been doing shows a lot of effort in thinking about things and addressing them, and that is not what we've seen in the general public of crowdfunding. So there will be a consolidation in this market, I'm sure, and a shakeout, which is good. There will be some scandals, that's my, as I said, personal weather forecast, which will negatively affect you with your efforts and us as Business Angel and Business Angel Network organizers, because the public will not be able to differentiate between what has been done well and what not. They're not so deep into it. It's just somebody, you know, abused the funds. They collected money, and then the managing director paid himself out a 200,000 euro yearly, you know, whatever. So, yeah, or he said, okay, I need to do another a crowdfunding campaign, and I invest the money in launching 10 other projects, collecting another 200,000 each, so he ends up being a millionaire. I mean,
Peter has given this some thought. Since then, he knows how to.
So, and but to come back to your question, we spoke about a gray zone in regulation, and that the regulation is turning a blind eye to this phenomenon, and I agree, but the prosecutor will not eventually. So turning the blind eye by the BaFin or the FINMA in Switzerland does not protect you or me if I'm operating and running such a business. And that is really the big danger I see. And we've seen that with stock promoters largely in the recent months and years, that they have been just, you know, tucked away in Germany recently. So I think it's important to make a point about not mix things up and make sure. I mean, there's also business angels who say they are business angels, but really are not, which is also a problem sometimes. So there are certain standards. We're working on certain professional, ethical, and what you have standards to try to help and educate people and attract more capital for this asset class, because we have too little funding, and it's great that more money is available for startups. That's great. So in itself, it's good. But who said this this morning? Esther Dyson. 90% of the people in the Silicon Valley are just dynamic entrepreneurs and think everything is good, but there's 10% potential that will abuse things, and we all will suffer from these people, and there's one or two enough amongst the 100 that will create a problem. So I think it's very important to deal with this, to jointly discuss these things, and I have no answer for that.
I remember
do it this way.
in Austin last month at the U.S. Angel Conference, one comment was, technology changes, but human nature doesn't. Right, we can all relate to that. How about we just have time for a couple of more quick questions? Philippe.
Yeah, I have a question about shareholding.
Wait, can you take the mic?
Mike.
Because they translate.
If I understand well, your
crowd may be made out of 100 people that have invested there. They are all shareholders at the end of the day of the company. They are not grouped in a particular company. They are just individual shareholders.
So they're grouped.
No, they're grouped. We use an SPV.
Yeah, but they vote. So what happens for the next round, if business angels are coming in or VC, they will find themselves in the same round that 100 of people or just one?
No, just one. Only the cooperative itself.
Is it legally that will be only one shareholder?
Yeah.
So who will be the owner of that vote for the crowd? Yourself?
No.
The company?
The crowd itself and the cooperative has a board being made up from the entrepreneur as well.
Is it a corporation incorporated at the end?
It's the board.
What's the legal
who
statute of the crowd? What's the legal statute of the crowd? It's a company?
A cooperative company.
So we will, if we invest later, have only one previous investor, not 100 of them?
Yeah.
Okay, well, when I was told we had an...
Any numbers on demographics?
Demographics?
Are they business angels or not? Anything?
Male, 35 up to 45, highly educated. Average investment, 260 euros. Yeah. It's time to get some women in. No, that wasn't the bra ID.
What we see, on the other platforms, we see, I mean, the people don't have to give their demographics necessarily on some platforms, but first of all, we see a lot of more female startups on these platforms, or mixed startups with mixed, and also my impression is that the investors actually quite young in terms of like when they do identify themselves. But there seems to be, I think there's a mixture of people. There are sort of established investors who are trying this as a new tool and see where it's going to go them, and then there's a sort of new crowd that is coming who just wants to see whether or not they can become an investor in such a company, and they seem to be rather young.
Well, it's disruptive, we've heard that. It has the potential to be very disruptive. It has great potential for fraud. We won't figure out all the loopholes for perhaps some time, huh? But how exciting, huh? Doesn't Christian here have a very exciting company? And I don't know about you, but I would love to be in his shoes. It sounds like a lot of fun, huh? So please join me in thanking my panel, a very good panel. Thank you very much.